All right, Clara, today is just discussion day, talk about the meeting here. Thanks. There's the others. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see. You guys did fine. Good job.
I'm doing attendance.
I don't know what it is. Maybe it's my age. Oh, I think I've been doing this for a long time. It just seems like once you get something that you can crawl, you can't remember, it's hard to break the habit. All right. All right, chapter 5 today. Wow. Interesting chapter. And so we're talking about the Baptists, right? I gotta find it now.
It starts on page 89.
Thanks. All right. So give me your thoughts on the Baptists. What's the chapter begin talking about? Actually, it begins talking about someone who was a Baptist, right? Whose name is?
William Carey.
Carey, okay. So, all right.
So what I don't understand is why the previous chapters we read about, they were like spreading the gospel to the Native Americans and African Americans and people of white, like they were really like making advancements with it. And then now all of a sudden, when William Carey wants to go, they're like, all of a sudden, like missions isn't important.
Oh.
Their thinking has changed.
Okay, where's Carey from?
England?
Yeah. So he's not a colonist in the American colonies, right? And so these guys that are at odds with him they're not discussing, that issue. And even if they were, I'm guessing, I mean, if these same guys were in the colonies, they'd probably have the same attitude, when God's ready to reach these savage Indians, or whatever they call them, he'll do it. So that's the issue. He's coming from England, and these guys, and that doesn't mean that everybody would have the same attitude, but the reading gives you the idea that this was kind of a generalization. This is something that people pretty much were thinking under the influences of guys like this. Does that make sense? Yeah, there's a different scenario, not in the colonies here. About what year did that confrontation take place? There's not total agreement, but about when?
1786.
Yeah. Later he says that it maybe was more like 1785, but still, you got the main idea. So actually, this, if you put it in context of the American scene, Ella, American Revolution ended in, oh dear, help me out, was it 82 or 3? Do you guys remember when the war ended? It was about 7 years, so 7, 6, 8. I don't know, 82.
We barely
Miriam, do you know when the American Revolution ended? If you can answer, we're all in trouble, right? But it was right after that. I mean, within a couple, 3 years after the end of the American Revolution, that this took place in England with him. Okay. Yeah. Now, what was the real issue? He spends quite a bit of time developing this first part. What is the real issue that is at hand here?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, what is the real issue? When he says, sit down, young man, and God's ready, what is the real issue?
Next page says that this is usually, like, not actually the issue, but most people think it's hyper-Calvinism.
Yeah, what is hyper-Calvinism?
Calvinism, but more.
Calvinism on steroids. Have you studied Calvinism yet in your classes?
No, like 5, like.
Yeah, that's
the
the tulip.
Yeah.
Hyper-Calvinism.
Emphasizes God's sovereignty more than man's responsibility.
Yeah, but even, we like to say we believe in a balance between the two, and the Bible does teach both.
Isn't it when they're like, it would be wrong for us to evangelize other people because God has chosen, and like to try to convert someone that God didn't choose would be wrong?
Yeah, the thing is, different people define hyper-Calvinism different ways. So it depends on who you talk to. My understanding of hyper-Calvinism is that it takes it to the place of believing in double predestination. God predestines people to heaven and to hell. And I don't believe that, because I believe man predestined himself to hell by rebelling in the garden. It's not, so nobody can say, God, I'm in hell because God sent me here. Well, no, your own penalty of sin is what sealed your fate. But another nuance of that is the idea that there's no use in evangelizing because those who are chosen are going to get saved, and those who aren't. So let me ask this: do you believe that those who are chosen are going to get saved? Whether you do anything about it or not, will they still get saved? So why evangelize? Why missions? If that's true.
Because sometimes, like, the way they get saved, like, you have to be a part of it. Like, you don't have to be, but like God has chosen that that's what's going to happen.
Okay.
We don't know who's going to be saved, and it doesn't really matter because God doesn't say who's going to get saved and who's not. He just tells us to go. So
Okay.
the issue is more, are we obeying what God tells us?
Okay. So the same sovereign God who chose people to be saved is the sovereign God who chose the means by which they would be saved. Right? You notice the title here, the obligation to use means. Now that's the title, really part of the long title of his inquiry, right? So the real issue here is, should we be investing means in order to reach people with the gospel? Or is God going to take care of all that by himself? See? And he argued what we would argue today, that God has given us means, but he expects us to invest our lives, our dollars, or our euros, or whatever, in reaching the world for Christ. So the same sovereign God who chooses people also chooses the means by which they'll be reached. So if we don't do that, like you said, God's going to get it done. Jesus is going to build his church. But we miss out on the blessing of being a part of that.
What do they say then about the command Jesus gave us to go and make disciples? How do they argue with that? Because God gave us a command to do it, even though they might not be saved for us or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what?
All right, I'll play their role for now. Okay, I'm one of them. I would ask you, Miriam, who did Jesus give that command to?
He gave it to he told his disciples.
Yeah. And those disciples became what in the early church? What role did they play? What position? What was their title?
Awesome.
The apostles, right? So actually, Jesus did not give that command to the entire church for the duration of the church. He gave it to his apostles, and they fulfilled that by taking the gospel to the ends of the Roman world, and all that. So when the apostles died, the Great Commission that Jesus gave died with them.
Why would they say that, though, if the command says to take it to the ends of the world, when the Roman world was not the ends of the world?
Yeah.
So they know, like, those limited number of people couldn't have possibly done that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there are lots of problems with it, and I agree. But what I would say if I were one of them is that the New Testament often uses the word world in relation to the known world at that time, which would have been understood as the Roman world, and that's really what Jesus meant. He wasn't thinking of the globe; he was thinking of the Roman world, that fourth part of the statue. See, I mean, I don't agree with that. I'm just telling you that's an answer they could give you. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So we have to ask ourselves a question. When Jesus gave commands to his disciples, were some of those commands intended to be limited to his disciples, / apostles? Or how do we know if the intention is for those commands to continue to function throughout the church age? And how do you answer that question? For instance, a lot of us believe that certain gifts were not intended to be functional throughout the church age. Okay? The apostles were only those 12. After the age of the apostles, we don't have apostles anymore. So how do you know when a command is intended to be ongoing?
Usually like the tense, it's like presented in the Bible. Then like, I guess with like gifts, like I think it's like in Corinthians talks about like a certain gifts like tongues will cease.
Mhm.
It's like other cross references say in scripture.
Yeah. Yeah, when you see a command or a principle repeated, you see it sometimes in the Gospels, you see it played out in Acts, and then you see it taught in the epistles, you can pretty much be sure that that is intended to be an ongoing command or a principle. And the fact is, taking the gospel to the ends of the earth is the New Testament bleeds with that. Every letter that Paul wrote was written either to a church or to a leader in a church somewhere. It's all missions related. So, but go ahead.
Didn't Jesus also say, like, pray for his disciples, and then he prays for the people who will come, will believe through the people that the disciples will
Yes.
like?
Yeah, in John 17, his high priestly prayer, that's what he prays for those who will believe through their word.
Yeah.
Exactly. Sorry, keep on this. Yeah, it's an ongoing, you get the clear impression when you read these passages, this is something that's perpetual. It's not something that's limited to, one generation. Okay. And we also understand that part of the reason for this attitude was because the Reformation, kept people busy, right, in their own land. And countries like Germany and others were landlocked. They didn't have access to the oceans. And so for them, they just could hardly have time or resource to think beyond their own context. That made it hard. Yeah. Are you guys remembering that you're going to be reading the inquiry for your midterm next week?
What day is that?
I can't remember. It's on Canvas, the day that is due. You have to look and see. I'm sorry, I don't remember.
Is it open all day? Do you know?
Oh, yeah. I don't, okay.
Were you in class or?
No, it's, hold on, let's find out, just so you know.
Is it in like the files on Canvas? Or there's it?
Yeah, I think I did put it on the files, but, I think, let's make sure here, just a second. I just can't remember all the dates and everything I gave you for everything, so let me pull up. Canvas. What?
It's the left one.
That? I've never seen that one before. That's weird.
New.
Is it new?
Yeah.
Yeah, hey, by the way, have you guys gotten through the workshop signups to figure out how to shortcut they go around it? Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what's going on. All right. Let's go up here to module. Let's see. So week 8, midterm is due October 18. What day is the 18th? Today's 13th. Wednesday? It's due Wednesday at midnight. Yeah, there it is, October 13 at 11:59. And I don't think, let me just go to a preview of it. Okay, yeah, you're gonna, I'm just looking to see if I set a certain time limit. Let me go, I guess I have to go back to see that, just a second. Edit. Oh, I think it's set right back there, but here.
It's an hour.
An hour?
If you scroll, I think it's a 60 minutes.
60 minutes. And the idea there is that normally if we were in class, you'd have the whole period, which is 50 minutes. So I just made it an even hour. Okay. So, and again, what I'm looking for there is I don't want you just to regurgitate what he said. You can't have it in front of you. You can't have it open. So obviously, if you're just typing things that he says, that I want to know what you learned, what was interesting, or what was maybe God used to challenge your heart, or maybe there's something there that you didn't quite understand or sounds different from what we teach. So, but I think you'll find by and large that he's spot on, and we have really followed suit, with what he said. Okay.
We still have class that day.
Yep, we'll have class. And we had to miss class the other day too, so, I'm trying to keep from getting too far behind. All right, what else in the reading here?
There's a lot of talk about the Southern Baptist and the Northern Baptist.
Yeah. Okay, so let's, can you comment on one of those?
Seems like people say that the Southern Baptist mission was formed because the missionaries wanted to go, but they had slaves, and so the other conventions wouldn't send them.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if that was maybe it was one of the leading reasons to separate from them, but then.
Yeah, do you remember he comments that actually that probably wasn't the main reason. Slavery was an issue, but he mentions something else that really became probably the major issue in that. Do you remember what it was?
Not separation of the church, but is it the autonomy of the
Yes,
local church?
exactly. The Southern Baptist Convention wanted to call the shots. The agency, the mission society that they formed was going to make decisions, and they reacted against, a lot of the Baptists reacted against the authority invested in the organizations. Hey, wait, no. Authority is in the local church. You're here to come alongside the local church, not to tell them how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's still how it's run today.
I want to be careful answering that because I've actually heard Southern Baptists say that yes and no. Some do and some don't. Depends on where you are and so on. They do still collect money, and then you don't have to go on deputation and free field and all that. But I think that there is still, at least among some, there's still a lot of liberty within that for churches to act and so on. So I would say more so than ours, yes. But to say that it's totally authoritative I think would be an exaggeration. Yeah. What about the Northern Baptist Convention? They mentioned that one too. What was the issue in the North? It was a totally different issue.
Was this stuff with liberalism?
Yes. Good. Yep. Yeah. False doctors. I mean, a lot of these guys, remember, go over to Europe and they'd study and they picked up some liberal. And Miriam, I think we're not saying that all liberalism came from Europe, right? But a lot of the thinkers were German theologians, very scholarly. And we didn't have master's programs back then for people going in ministry, and Europe did. They were ahead of us that way, which makes sense. That's where the Reformation started. And so they were much more developed in their academic world. And so a lot of guys were bringing back liberalism. Now, there are two groups that I want to make sure we understand that come out of this, okay? One group immediately saw the handwriting on the wall. They said, we got to separate from this group. And they formed what organization? It's one that's well represented on our campus.
Guard?
Yeah, the General Association of Regular Baptist Churches, 1932 in Chicago. Belden Avenue Baptist Church. I think it still exists, I don't know. So they're the ones that got out right away and said, this is a sinking ship. We need to defend solid doctrine, start a new movement. Okay. And some of you, Miriam, some of the missionaries, I think the Ellises and the Bungers probably came out of regular Baptist churches in their background. By the way, is there a regular Baptist church movement in Germany? Or some of the churches call them that or not? Is your church part of an association of churches? It's just independent.
Yeah, we don't have that. I think they have something like that, but then they work together with the Catholic Church. That's the only thing we have.
Okay.
And so that's why we're why our name is Free Baptist Church, because we have a Baptist church in Ingolstadt but they are in association with like, or like work together with the Catholic Church. But we don't have one for like the Baptist churches,
Okay.
like.
No fellowship of churches.
No, like we work together.
Uh-huh.
And like they meet together, like the pastors twice a year or something.
Mhm.
But we don't like have an official thing,
Yeah.
I think. Maybe. I think the missionaries had something, like for the missionaries,
Right.
but then I don't know if that's still, I think it exists, but only for the missionaries and
Yeah.
not for the churches.
Gotcha. Okay. Yep. Good. So that's a group that came out of it. Now there's another group that said we want to stay in and fix the problem. We can correct this heresy issue. We can turn this ship around. But eventually they realized that they just couldn't do it. And they came out eventually and they were called. Anybody remember who they were? They were the Conservative Baptists. Okay. And so that's another group that separated, but they didn't separate for a long time. They thought they could. Just remember, in America, you had the Pilgrims, you had the Separatists, and you had the Puritans. The Puritans tried to stay in and purify the Anglican Church, right? And the Separatists are the ones that came out. So same thing happens with the Baptists in the Northern Baptist Convention. Now today, there's no such thing as Northern Baptist Convention. There still is a Southern Baptist Convention, but the Northern Baptist Convention pretty much became what we call the American Baptist Church. Okay? That still exists. In fact, I have a brother, an older brother, that was a pastor in an American Baptist church for a while. He was actually an associate pastor in the church. And he's not in it anymore, but so that's kind of what happened there. So you have all these new groups coming out of that movement.
Can you explain what happened with Crawford Toy? What was his belief on inspiration?
He had doubts on it, and I think he also embraced evolution. But, okay, to be fair, a lot of solid Bible scholars embraced evolution. They believed in theistic evolution. Okay, in fact, there were people that taught here. Gray Hall is named after a man that, at least for a time, embraced theistic evolution. They believed that God controlled it, but that it did happen. You know, so he was hanging out with people who were embracing liberalism, and I think they mentioned inspiration of Scripture. Usually, though, look, if you doubt the inspiration of Scripture, you're going to doubt other things. Once you give up that doctrine, what's going to stop you from doubting the deity of Christ? Well, the Bible says that, but that part there might have been changed later, you know, or might have been added. So inspiration, it has to be your foundation. If you don't believe that God breathed the Scriptures and they're authoritative, then nothing stands in your way. Any heresy can happen. And she saw that. And, you know, now, was she wanting to marry this guy? Yeah. Because somebody asked her later, remember that? Did you ever, you know, was there any romance in your life, or however they asked that question? She said, yeah, but my devotion to Christ had to come first. Yeah. What else about the reading?
On page 94,
Mhm.
I think it's a section under, it's called Carrie's Mature View of Means.
Mhm.
I just underlined it. It's kind of the like bottom paragraph. It's like the middle. It says, every person to whom God has given abilities for the work is bound to devote himself to the work of the ministry. I was like, huh. I was like, oh my.
That mean everybody has to be a missionary?
No, I was like, well, like, I guess, I don't know, as I got from it, he's like, if you have the abilities to do it, then like, you should do it.
Mhm.
So I was like, like, let me think of like free will, like, or not free will, I should say, but like, some people are like, oh, I want to do full-time ministry, I feel called to that. So I'm like, well, like, I guess the question I should say is like, if someone does have the gifts to do it, like, wouldn't that desire come with it?
Mhm. Yes. In fact, usually those two go together.
Mm-hmm.
You desire, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I would say, like, sometimes you don't have the desire, but then as you pray about it, God can give you the desire.
Mhm. Which is exactly what happened to me in Brazil when they first started contacting me about coming here and doing what I'm doing now. I had zero desire to do that. I was a missionary, but I'd never taught a missions course in my life because I was teaching New Testament and doctrine at our seminary. So, people thought, oh, yeah, he's a missionary. He can teach the missions classes. I didn't know what a missions class looked like. I had intro to missions in college. And basically, we were memorizing the names of agencies and the presidents of the agencies and how that was about it, And so, yeah, I had to really pray. And as I prayed, I had to trust God to shape my heart. Yeah, let's just read a little bit. That's a really good quote, Matthew. Is it down near the bottom of E? Let's see.
It's like this paragraph, right?
Yeah. I am fully of the opinion that every person to whom God has given abilities for the work is bound to devote himself to the work of the ministry. It is not at the option of such a person whether he will engage in it or not, nor is it at the option of a church whether it will send one to the work of the ministry upon whom God has bestowed spiritual gifts. If the church neglects to send such a member into the ministry, the guilt lies on them. Notice his emphasis on church leadership. It's not just the individual saying, I'm going to go on his own, her own, right? The number of persons now required to spread the gospel. So I don't think, Matthew, that means that if you're a good preacher, you have to go into the ministry. There are a lot of people that are good at speeches that do other things. I think it's the package.
Yeah.
You sense God's given you the tools. I sense as a young person, I never had any inkling to do, business or, medicine or anything else like that, law. But early on, I had a desire to teach and preach the word. So, God used that. And I think that's what he's saying. He wouldn't be a Moravian that says everybody, I actually wrote the word good by the quote here. It's really, really like that quote. What else? Did you notice that several of them believed when things started really going, well, okay, let me back up. When did the Baptist missions movement really start cranking up, really start developing? There's a specific point at which that started happening. What was that? It was something we studied.
When the Judsons have been baptized.
Mm-hmm. When the Judsons became Baptists, and then they left. In fact, remember when they became Baptists, they were honest about it. They wrote back, and so the mission agency that was congregational, had to remove their authorization, their support. And some people in that congregational society, mission society, were afraid, this whole thing's going to fall apart now because Judsons were our flagship missionaries, but it didn't. But that's the point at which Baptist missions really began to flourish. People learned about Judson. Of course, Carey was already a Baptist, but Judson was from the U.S., right? Carey was from England. And so things really began to develop. And it started developing so quickly that some of them started believing what? So many people are getting saved, so many missions were spreading so quickly that what a lot of people conclude.
Times for the year.
Yeah, the Lord's coming has got to be soon. Just like that question you asked me, look at Israel, what does that mean? And here you're talking early 1800s, right? And here down at the bottom of 96, about 70 had been added to the Baptist church in Bardenston, and a like number to the Congregational Church. Dear sir, he concluded, after such an encouraging sermon, we have long been praying for that happy era called the millennium. May we not hope it has already begun?
What was the date for this time?
Well, it was the early 1800s what was the year that they left? I don't remember the year that the Judsons left.
You're around 1812.
Yeah, in fact, it was right before the War of 1812 broke out. It was earlier in the year. Yeah. So what kind of eschatology would they hold to if they believed that now that this thing is growing so quickly, the millennial kingdom must be starting?
Did they usher in the kingdom?
Yeah, which system is that? No, because they did mention millennium, so the millennium means no millennium. That would be us, at least me.
It'll be post.
Post. So they believe that the church is now bringing in the kingdom, the millennium must be starting, and when the whole world is one, then Jesus comes back post-millennial, right? He comes back, the church does the work on earth. When it's done, the kingdom is established, Jesus comes and takes his throne.
How do they think there's a tribulation period?
No, only premillennialism believes in a tribulation period. At least, well, I probably shouldn't say that, there'd be somebody out there, but basically post and amillennialism do not believe in a literal 1,000 years. So they don't believe in a literal 7-year tribulation. All that stuff is more just figurative.
I thought they believed in the tribulation, but that it was gonna happen while everybody was still on earth.
Okay, they may use the word tribulation, but they don't believe in a literal 7-year tribulation.
Sure.
What we call the tribulation. Yeah, they believe that there is going to be worsening at the end of the church age. So there'll be tribulation, but eventually the gospel will overcome that and the world will be converted and Jesus will come back. But remember that World War I and World War II really put a damper on that because people viewed Europe as being Christian. And when the wars failed, people felt like, okay, we're not winning the world after all. In fact, things are getting worse instead of better. So post-millennialism really became unpopular because of that. Now there's kind of a resurgence of that.
How did Baptists get from this belief to rejecting that now?
Rejecting what?
Like the idea of like post-tribulation?
They never did. They weren't into that.
Isn't it talking about Baptists right here?
No, notice at the bottom of 96, he mentions that both Baptists and Congregationalists were growing. Okay, so this guy, he is, let's see, magazine reports of church revival continue for 14 years later. Where does this quote come from? 21. It comes from, well, it does come from the American Baptist magazine. Yeah, okay.
Because that whole section was talking about Baptists.
Yeah.
And like one thing I highlighted at the top was like, in the United States, they believed, I'm reading this now, would become the basis for the spread of Christ's kingdom, and Baptist churches being its purest expression. It's kind of like the idea that they thought like Baptists were gonna kind of take over like the head of it.
Yeah, okay, you're right, because even the Southern Baptists today, in fact, the book we're using for church planning class right now, the author is a Southern Baptist and he uses the word kingdom and all that a lot. So within the Baptist movement, there were groups that came out and had differences in doctrine. So I don't know what percentage of the Southern Baptists would hold to a post or amillennial position, but the majority would. So you're right. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I misspoke in answering you, but there were groups that came out, like the General Association of Baptist Churches and others that took a position.
So we just kind of changed, a Baptist in general kind of changed the belief, because most believe now in like, well, is there a main belief for Baptists about like the tribulation and stuff? Or is it very?
Well, the Southern Baptist Convention is the biggest group of Baptists in America.
Sure.
And most of them are not believers in premillennialism or pre-tribulationalism.
What about non-Southern Baptists?
It depends. Like the GRBC does. I think, and there are some groups that just don't make an issue of it. So within the group, for instance, I have relatives that go to a church it's an independent church, but it has Southern Baptist roots, Keystone, and they don't take a position. There are people in the church that are pre, post, and whatever else, and so they believe very firmly in the second coming of Christ, which is one of the 5 fundamentals of faith that guys like. There were several that established those 5 fundamentals in the early 1900s, and so I think probably the best answer to your question is it depends. Within the GRBC or movements like that, a lot of fun in independent Baptist churches, you'll find that it's pretty strong.
Are Southern Baptist churches
gospel believing?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Well, okay, well, yes, okay. We don't have time for this. In fact, what is the actual time? That's wrong.
49.
Okay, really quick. The Southern Baptist Church experienced a split. And a lot of people thought it was just going to completely go liberal. In fact, it started going liberal. And then certain leaders came in and really took a stand on the conservative side. And so there is a split today in the Southern Baptist Convention. So it just depends on who you talk to. We had churches in Brazil that were conservative Southern Baptist churches that were doing a good job and believed like we did. So it gets kind of messy.
Sure.
You have to talk to people and their churches, and because if you believe in the autonomy of the church, then they have a right to take a strong stand or let people believe what they want about certain things. All right, we got to stop. Thanks. So much more to say, but I hope the book is being helpful to you.
Dr. Mark,
Yeah.
how important do you think it is that a local church, that they're all unified in a belief of